During the Week 3 forced labour block, we were first introduced to the events surrounding the Colston plinth. In the Colston Fours video, we looked at the politics surrounding #BLM in the US, which began with the deaths of a number of black people who were murdered by US police. Most notably, however, was the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis on the 25th of May 2020, which spurred anti-racism protests worldwide. This then gave rise to similar protests in Bristol, where BLM protesters in Bristol had gathered on Colston Avenue. This protest was a particularly deeply rooted struggle for many black Bristolians, as many had ancestors who had suffered as a result of Bristol's past slaving industry. Our initial line of inquiry then began with us questioning what actually happened to the plinth during the anti-racism demonstrations in Bristol. Firstly, we need to know what happened to the plinth. By revisiting the Colston Fours video in Week 3 of the forced labour block and making some broad Google searches, we were able to discover the history of the plinth. On the 13th of November 1895, the statue of Edward Colston, Bristol's most famous philanthropist, was unveiled by the Lord Mayor of Bristol. On the 18th of October 2020, a guerrilla art depicted 100 human figures in a particular formation that represented slaves who were transported in brutal conditions. On reading around this in local news sites such as Bristol Live, it became clear to us that the existence of the statue was highly controversial and provoked tension among locals. On the 7th of June 2020, a wave of Black Lives Matter protesters took place in the city of Bristol. Protesters gathered on Colston Avenue, where they used ropes to bring down the bronze statue, eventually leading to the toppling of Edward Colston's statue. The statue was then dragged across Bristol towards the floating harbour, leaving the plinth completely empty. We are interested in what is going to happen to the plinth. The plinth and the statue upon which it has been based had been the site of such a divide between the citizens and Bristol for so long. Therefore, what will happen to Colston's plinth now that it is empty? By choosing to focus on the plinth within Bristol, we will also seek to further the sense of place we have of Bristol. Many Bristolians associate the plinth being intertwined with Bristol's dark past. This links to how Paul Adams described a sense of place as a form of identification with the place endangered by living in it. The plinth was an important focus for our research question, as it's been such a central part of Bristol's past, present and future. It symbolises the many black slaves who were victims of Colston's slave trade, and it represents the modern day struggle against racism in the city, but also what the plinth could symbolise in the future. This strongly links to the idea of a palimpsest, which we were introduced to in the 9th week, a post-industrial city. In describing a palimpsest, Mike Krang says that as each era is overtaken by the next, so it leaves traces and redundancies, obsolences and irrationalities, that things that remain as a mark, the burden of the past, or an inheritance depending on your point of view. We can almost use this passage to describe the plinth. In pursuing this line of inquiry, we have started off by looking at the layering of histories associated with the plinth.
To try and answer our research question, we want to begin by picking apart the question. To answer what will happen to the plinth, we need to know the context about its history and significance in Bristol. When was it first installed? What did it stand for? Why was it torn down? This will give us the basis to then be able to understand the significance and what will come after it. At the moment, the future of the plinth is still in consideration, so we'd want to know to look into what people are saying about both the plinth and what should replace it. This could be in the form of articles, council documents, interviews and other secondary data providing us with relevant details, similar to the research methods used in week 2 until 5 of the forced labour and industrial work sections of the module. An early temporary sculpture of BLM protester Jen Reed, designed by artist Mark Quinn, was laid on the plinth on the 15th of July, shortly following the toppling of the Colston statues 8 days prior. Mark Quinn justified his sculpture, noting it was meant to be a temporary installation to continue the conversation about racism. He said he was inspired to create it after seeing an image of Miss Reed standing on the plinth with her fist raised during the Black Lives Matter protest on the 7th of June. Ms. Reed said the sculpture was important because it helped keep the journey towards racial justice and equality moving. A day later, at 5 a.m, the Bristol City Council removed the statue due to the fact the artist had not obtained planning permission. This opened up another question asking who had the power to determine what will happen to the Colston plinth, or more specifically, who will decide on the future of the plinth. Although the Mayor Rees appreciates the symbolism of the empty plinth, he has also stated he would like to see a memorial for the true heroes of Bristol, those who stood up for the poor, marginalised, oppressed in the city. Since the Mayor said the future of the plinth must be democratically decided by the people of Bristol, we then wanted to find out what the citizens of Bristol thought should happen to the plinth.
2 days after the pulling down of Colston's statue, globally renowned graffiti artist Banksy posted a sketch to his Instagram depicting a scene dedicated to the slaves involved in the slave trade in Bristol during the 18th century. The sketch shows Banksy's proposal for the future design of the statue, if the statue was to be turned to its plinth in Bristol's harbour. He states, although a little sarcastically, that his design will be able to please both those who want the statue up and those who tore it down, since it comprises of the statue of Edward Colston returning to the plinth, but with a tie cable around his neck surrounded by bronze statues of protesters pulling him down. Banksy's proposal to create statues of protesters led us down a further line of inquiry into who would be most likely portrayed out of those who played a part in the removal of the statue.
Moreover, our rabbit hole journey led us to be interested in the public response of who should be honoured through the plinth. We found out that after the toppling of the infamous Colston statue, a petition on change.org was launched to erect a new statue of Paul Stephenson, OBE, created by Edward Beeston. The petition reads, "It is time a suitable replacement is found that honours Black Bristolians." This petition highlights the general public desire for Bristol to move forward from its past legacy and educate citizens about important moments of Bristol's Black history. Stephenson was chosen to be commemorated for his key leading role in the Bristol bus boycott in 1963. It was successful, as after 60 days of boycott supported by thousands of Bristolians, the company revoked its colour bar. Stephenson's activism was key in influencing the first Race Relations Act in 1965, the first legislation to address racial discrimination in the UK. This proves to be a highly significant first step in giving back power to the historically oppressed Afro-Caribbean community.
Whilst we were in Bristol, we noticed that a QR code next to the plinth. After we scanned it, we found a wealth of ideas by many different people. Google searches into the future of the plinth led our line of inquiry to the People's Platform, an interactive public art experience at the Watershed website. It gave valuable information on what should replace Colston's place on the plinth. Blank Canvas promotes involvement and inclusion of anyone who is interested in the plinth. Mr. Who aims to target the creativity of school children because their expression and thoughts about the plinth are missing. He argues that they should amplify their voices as they are the future Bristolians. The project will continue active with a recent statue and story to be created and shared per month. Support from renowned and well-funded establishments underlie the national significance of the issue of the plinth, which run deeper than the physical replacement itself. This is an important database that enables academic researchers to try and answer the question we have posed. The data reveals personal opinions based around individual experience. There are currently 4 statues uploaded on the website. However, 2 are of particular note to this presentation. Moment represents the splash that the statue of Colston made when it landed in the harbour, and this event actually inspired the artist to move to Bristol. The designer also notes that the statue is an expression of the ever-evolving fluidity and transience of history. Many Faces is designed by Jazz Thompson, an artist in Bristol who used innovative art to create this piece. The aim of this piece is to create a platform so that new voices can be heard in Bristol city centre, and Jazz describes the statue as a celebration of diversity in all its forms.
Our line of inquiry stemmed from our curiosity into the events of the Black Lives Movement and the toppling of Colston's statue. By revisiting the material covered in week 3 of the Forced Labour block, we decided to delve deeper into what the future holds for the plinth. Starting off with broad Google searches, we found some online news articles. Some were more useful than others. For instance, the Bristol Live news website seemed to have the most information, as it gave quotes about local people involved and who may not have appeared on larger national news sites, which in turn encouraged the inquiry line to follow down deeper rabbit holes. For instance, the response by Marvin Rees, as well as Stephenson's reaction to the petition. In addition, Bristol Live came across as an unbiased source, expressing the views from those of different sides of the argument, allowing us to better understand locals' perspectives. While researching the future plans for the plinth, it became clear to us that it could be easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of detail provided by sources. However, we found by focusing on one piece of information at a time and researching further around it allowed us to delve into the rabbit hole and our line of